There was a small fountain in the middle of the commons level of Crossroads Anchor, and nobody paid much attention to it except the children of various species who liked to chase the tiny light motes that drifted up from the water. The commons was loud most hours of the day, traders arguing, diplomats pretending not to argue, food vendors calling out to anyone who slowed down near their stalls. It was the kind of place where it was easy to miss small things. Rail Oren was not the kind of person who missed small things. He had a bench he liked near the east wall, close enough to the fountain to hear the water, but far enough from the main walkway that people rarely bothered him. He ate his lunch there most days, usually something from the Frenali stall that tasted like warm bread and something faintly like mint, and he wrote in his field journal, and he watched the commons the way a person watches a fire, not looking for anything in particular, just paying attention. He noticed the hatchling on his third day. She was sitting very still near the fountain, which was strange because the other young Varith on the station were almost always moving. Varith young were built like small, compact storms, quick and bright, and always tumbling over each other. This one sat apart from the group. Her scales were the color of a shallow sea, teal and gold shifting depending on the light, and her wings were pressed so tightly against her sides that they looked almost like they were folded into her body. Rail watched her. He did not write anything yet. A small Dalhuri child, four-armed, round-eyed, no older than 4 by human reckoning, wandered over from the fountain and reached toward the hatchling's wing with that particular confidence that very young creatures have before they learn what is and is not allowed. The hatchling went rigid, not frightened, something else. Her whole body locked, and the wing on her left side pressed down harder, and there was a quality to that movement that Rail could not name yet, but recognized the way you recognize a word in a language you half know. Before the Dalhuri child made contact, a Varith female appeared from 3 meters away and placed herself between them without a sound. The child's parent collected it a moment later with a string of apologies. The Varith female, the hatchling's mother, clearly, stood with her back to the child and looked down at the hatchling with an expression that was not anger. It was something much older and more tired than anger. The hatchling looked up at her mother. She pressed her small snout briefly against the female's foreleg. Then she looked back at the fountain. Rail opened his field journal. He wrote, "Wing contact avoidance, enforced by mother but also initiated independently by the hatchling before intervention. Not social fear response. Left wing depresses on a distinct axis when proximity is close. Rigid, not a flinch. Held position. Pain response." He ate the rest of his lunch. Across the commons, the mother settled back into her watching place, and the hatchling sat alone by the fountain, and the light motes drifted up from the water in slow spirals. After a while, one drifted near the hatchling's face. She tracked it with her eyes. It hovered close, and she lifted her head and blew a soft breath at it. Not fire, just air, the way very young Varith played, and the light mote spun in a bright circle. The hatchling made a sound, a low, pleased sound, like a purr mixed with a chime. Then her left wing shifted as she turned to watch the mote drift away, and the sound stopped. The pleased look on her face went somewhere else, replaced by something carefully blank. Rail watched this. He knew the basics of Varith culture the way any xenobiologist stationed on Crossroads Anchor knew them. The wings were not merely wings. Varith called them the soul's hands. To touch a Varith's wings without consent was not just rude. It was, depending on the context, something close to violence. No healer on the station had been able to examine the hatchling in. He would check the station records later, but from the look of the mother's eyes, it had been a long time. He did not know the hatchling's name yet. He did not approach. He did not ask. He wrote one more line in his journal before he packed up his lunch and left. Left wing. Specific angle. Not random. Worth paying attention to. The mother watched him go. He did not look back at her. Down by the fountain, the hatchling caught another light mote on the tip of her snout and held very still, delighted, careful not to move her wings at all. Rail came back the next day, and the day after that. He did not change anything about his routine. Same bench, same lunch from the Frenali stall, same field journal. He read, he wrote, he watched the commons the way he always did, and he did not look at the hatchling any more than he looked at the fountain or the walkway or the Dalhuri vendor shouting about fried grain pods on the far side of the level. But he noticed everything. On the second day he confirmed it, the left wing. Whenever the hatchling shifted left or spread even slightly in that direction, there was a pause in her movement, a half-second freeze that was too consistent to be accident. On the third day, he noticed she never slept on her left side when she dozed in the afternoon warmth near the fountain. On the fourth day, he timed the intervals between each freeze and wrote them down in a column in the back of his journal. He was on the sixth day when the mother came to him. She walked across the commons with the deliberate quiet of a species that could, if it chose, move without making any sound at all. She stopped in front of his bench. She was large. Adult Verith were roughly the size of a draft horse, and her scales were a deeper teal than her daughter's, more blue than gold. She looked down at him with eyes the color of amber. "You keep coming here," she said. Her galactic common was precise and flat. "I do," Rail said. "You watch my daughter." "I watch the whole commons," he said. "She is part of it." The mother's gaze did not soften. "We have been on this station for 3 years. Many beings have watched her. Healers, scientists, diplomats trying to demonstrate goodwill." Her voice went somewhere dry and empty on those last words. None of them could help her. "Humans have been on this station for 8 months. You are not a healer." "No," Rail agreed. "I'm a xenobiologist." "Then you have no business watching my daughter." Rail closed his journal. He looked up at her. "The left wing," he said. "She freezes when it extends past a certain angle. The freeze lasts about half a second. It is consistent. It is not social. It is physical." He paused. "I noticed that on the first day. I wanted to make sure I was right before I said anything." The mother was very still. "I'm not here to treat her," Rail said. "I can't. I don't have consent, and I don't have the full picture yet. I'm here because I noticed something, and I didn't want to stop noticing it." He picked up his lunch. "That's all." He left. He did not look back, but he heard no movement from behind him for a long time. The next morning, something different happened. Rail was settled on his bench, halfway through his food, when he became aware of a presence approximately 1 meter to his left. He glanced over without turning his head. The hatchling was sitting beside the bench, watching him with enormous amber eyes. He looked back at his journal. He kept eating. She crept 3 inches closer. He did not react. She crept another 3 inches. He turned a page. She was now close enough that he could hear the faint, dry sound of her scales shifting as she breathed. He said, in the simplest Verith greeting phrase he knew, the equivalent of, "Good afternoon, small one." His pronunciation was terrible. He knew it was terrible. The hatchling stared at him. Then she made a sound, a short, bright, cascading sound, and he realized, with a small and private joy, that she was laughing at him. He nodded gravely, as if to say, "Yes, I know. I am aware I sound ridiculous." He went back to his journal. She sat with him for 2 hours that afternoon. When she left, she dropped something on the bench beside him, a small white pebble, smooth, with a faint purple vein running through it. He picked it up. He turned it over in his hand. He put it in his jacket pocket. On the other side of the commons, the mother watched all of this with her arms folded and her jaw tight, and something behind her eyes that she had no word for in any language she knew. The Verith counselor, Bram, found Rail near the exit corridor that evening. Bram was old, ancient, by most species' reckoning, with scales so deep a violet they were nearly the color of a bruise. He did not waste time. "The human delegation," Bram said, "does not have clearance for unsanctioned interaction with Verith minors." "I know," Rail said. "Then you understand the risk you are taking." "Yes." Rail stopped walking and turned to face him. "Counselor, how long has she been in pain?" Bram said nothing. His jaw moved once, very slightly. Rail nodded and kept walking. In his jacket pocket, the small white pebble was cool against his hand. The hatchling's name was Dara. Rail learned this not by asking, but because he heard her mother say it one afternoon when the hatchling had climbed to the top of the fountain's edge and was refusing to come down. He kept the name in his journal, but did not use it yet. Names, in his experience, were a kind of door. You waited until you were invited through them. Their routine had settled into something neither of them had agreed to out loud. Dara came to the bench most afternoons. She sat near him. Sometimes she brought things, a piece of bent wire she found near the maintenance corridor, a dried seed pod that rattled pleasingly when shaken, once a small bolt that she presented with great seriousness, as if it were a treasure of significant importance. Rael accepted each item with equal seriousness and said thank you using the Verith dip of the ears that meant gratitude between equals. This made her collapse into that bright, cascading laugh every single time. She found it extraordinary that a human would do that. He found her laughter the best sound on the station. He was careful, always, about movement. He never reached toward her. He never leaned in her direction without warning. When he needed to shift on the bench, he said, quietly, "Moving my arm now," and moved it slowly. He had no idea if she understood the words. He thought she understood the intent. He was also watching. The pattern of the wing stiffening was clearer to him now. It was always the left wing. It was always at a specific angle, roughly 40 degrees of extension from the resting position. Anything below that, Dara moved freely. Above that, the freeze hit. Sometimes, when she forgot herself while laughing, the wing would begin to spread and then jerk back, and the laugh would cut off like a light going out. Those moments made something tighten in Rael's chest. He went to find Dr. Wessa on the 7th day of Dara sitting with him. Wessa was the station's senior healer, a Threnali, amphibious, with bioluminescent patches along her neck that shifted color with her mood. She was currently a steady blue-green, which meant calm and attentive. She listened to Rael's questions without interrupting. Wing anatomy, Rael said. Specifically the root structures. The plates beneath the scales at the wing joint. I want to know everything you know. Wes's patches shifted briefly toward yellow, curiosity. Is this about the Verith hatchling? It's theoretical, Rael said. Wessa looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, theoretically, and told him everything. He listened for an hour. He asked 17 follow-up questions. He went back to his quarters and spread his notes across the floor and sat in the middle of them and thought for a very long time. Scale root calcification. It was rare in hatchlings, so rare that most Verith healers had never seen a case. The root plates beneath the wing scales, which should remain flexible during the first 4 years of growth, sometimes began to fuse too early. The fusion was progressive. It was painful in a way that was difficult to describe to someone without wings, like having a joint slowly filled with stone from the inside, while being told you could not ask for help, because asking for help required exposing the very thing that was destroying you. It was treatable, if caught within the first 4 years. Rael did not know exactly how old Dara was. He looked at his notes. He looked at the timeline the mother had given him inadvertently, 3 years on this station, seeking help, finding none. He looked at the rate of the freeze progression he had tracked over the past 2 weeks. The angle was narrowing. Slowly, steadily. He wrote it all up. 12 pages, clean and precise, with his observations and his reasoning and his hypothesis and the treatment protocol he had drafted with Wes's anatomy notes. He did not use Dara's name in the document. He wrote hatchling throughout. He did not know why, exactly, except that it felt like the right kind of care. He found Soren, Dara's mother, the next morning. He did not explain. He did not ask for anything. He held out the folded document and said, I might be wrong. I don't think I am. Soren took it. That evening, Rael sat on his bench alone. Dara had not come that day. He was not surprised. He sat with his journal and did not write anything and watched the light motes drift above the fountain until the commons lights dimmed to evening mode. He was almost back to his quarters when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Soren stood in the corridor. Her eyes were amber and very bright, the way eyes get after a long time of crying. She did not speak for a moment. Then she said, in a voice that was nearly steady, How long have you known? I had a strong idea at the end of the first week, he said. I wanted to be sure. She looked at him. Something in her face moved through several things he did not have names for. Then she said, Why? He thought about it honestly. Because she laughed at my Verith accent, he said, and I wanted to make sure she could keep doing that. Soren made no sound. She turned and walked back the way she had come. Rael went to his quarters and made himself a cup of tea and sat by the small porthole and watched the gas giant below turning slow and enormous in the dark. Soren came to him on the 3rd morning after he gave her the document. She walked into the commons and sat down beside him on the bench without asking, which was not a thing she had done before. Rael set his journal aside. If your hypothesis is correct, she said without preamble, what does the treatment look like? He told her. He was careful and plain about it. There was no surgery. There was a compound, a bioresonance solution that Dr. Wessa could synthesize, that would break down the calcified fusions gradually when applied directly to the affected root plates. But it required physical contact with the wing. Precise contact, at the exact points of fusion, held long enough to let the compound absorb. It would cause pain before it caused relief. He did not soften that part. Soren listened without moving. When he finished, she said, "How certain are you?" "Very certain about the diagnosis," he said. "Reasonably certain about the treatment working if we act soon. Less certain every week we wait." She was quiet. Then, every healer we saw asked for the same thing. "Wing access." I said no every time. "I know. I have good reasons." "I know that too." She looked at him sideways. "You are not going to tell me my reasons are wrong." "No," Rail said. "I am going to tell you that I think Dara is running out of time. And then I am going to stop talking, because it is your decision and hers, and it should be." Soren looked at the fountain for a long time. Dara was across the commons, industriously trying to catch a light mote in her front claws instead of her snout. She had been at it for 20 minutes. She had not succeeded yet, but she was deeply committed to the attempt. "There is a formal process," Soren said finally, "for granting wing contact consent to a non-Verith. It has not been used often." "I know it exists," Rail said. "I don't know the specifics. Counselor Bram would have to conduct it." She paused. "He does not like you." "That's fine. I don't need him to like me." She almost smiled. It was a very small, almost smile, and it was gone quickly, but Rail noted it. Bram did not receive the request warmly. He received it the way a person receives a bill they were expecting, but were still hoping would not arrive. He sat behind his desk in the Verith delegation office with his ancient violet-scaled hands folded on the surface and his expression arranged into something professionally neutral over something that was much less neutral. "You understand," he said to Rail, "that if this procedure harms her in any way, the diplomatic consequences will be significant." "I understand," Rail said. "You understand that the consent ceremony is not a formality. It is binding. If you are granted wing contact consent for this specific purpose and you exceed that purpose in any way." "I understand," Rail said again. "Counselor, she is 3 years old and she is in pain. If there is a ceremony that allows me to help her, I will stand through it for as long as you need. I will stand through it twice." Bram looked at him for a long time. The ceremony happened 2 days later in a small room off the medical bay. Bram, Soren, and Dr. Wessa as witness. Rail stood in the center of the room with his hands at his sides. Bram spoke in formal Verith, long, rhythmic phrases that Rail could not follow, though Wessa translated quietly beside him. He was being named. The purpose was being named. The limits were being named. He was being told, in a language far older than any he had studied, that what he was being given was not a tool. It was a trust. He stood still and kept his hands at his sides and his head slightly bowed, because that felt right, and listened to words he did not understand, and understood them anyway. Then came the part nobody had warned him about. Soren had explained it to Dara that morning. Rail did not know exactly what she had said. He only knew that Dara came into the room behind her mother with wide eyes and her wings pressed flat in the old way, the careful, protective way, and stood looking at him from across the space. He crouched down to her level. He did not reach out. He waited. Dara looked at him for a long time. She looked at her mother. Soren gave her a very small nod. Dara turned back to Rail. He could see her working through it. The old fear, the old tightness, everything her body had learned to do over 3 years. He stayed very still. He kept his face open and calm. He was not in a hurry. Then, slowly, with the deliberate courage of something very small deciding to be very brave, Dara extended her left wing. Not far, just an inch or two past the resting position, just barely past the angle where the pain began to rise. Her whole body trembled faintly with the effort. Rail did not move. He said softly, in the worst Verith accent she had ever heard in her life, "Thank you, small one." Dara held the wing out, trembling, brave, and somewhere behind Rail, very quietly, Soren made a sound like a long breath finally let go. The medical bay on Crossroads Anchor was built for many species, which meant it was larger than most rooms on the station and filled with equipment in shapes that did not always make immediate sense. Rail had spent 3 evenings in there with Dr. Wessa, going over the procedure step by step, and Wessa had been thorough and serious and had twice corrected his assumptions about Verith tissue density in ways that improved the plan considerably. Now the room felt much smaller. Dara lay on a padded surface at the center of the room. Soren stood near the door, close enough to reach her daughter in 2 steps, far enough to give Rail space to work. Wessa stood at the equipment table with the bio-resonance compound in a sealed applicator, waiting. The compound was pale gold, which Rail thought was fitting, though he did not say so. He pulled a low stool to Dara's left side and sat down. He did not pick up anything yet. He looked at her. "I am going to tell you everything before I do it," he said slowly, in simple galactic common. "Every step. If you want me to stop, you move this." He held up a small blue square of cloth. "Can you hold that for me?" Dara looked at the cloth. She reached out and took it in her front claw. "Good," Rail said. "Move that and I stop." Immediately. No questions. She held the cloth tightly. She was watching him with the focused intensity of a creature that had learned not to trust easily and was deciding, right now, that it was going to try. "I am going to put my hand near your wing first," Rail said. "Not touching, just near. Ready?" She did not move the cloth. He brought his hand to within 2 centimeters of the joint of her left wing. He felt the heat of her scales from there. Varith ran warm, warmer than humans. He held his hand still for a full 10 seconds, letting her feel the proximity before contact. Then, gently, he made contact. She flinched. Her whole body pulled inward for a fraction of a second. He held still and waited. Slowly, she settled again. The cloth stayed in her claw. "Good," he said quietly. "That is the worst of the first contact. Well done." He began to work. He narrated each movement before he made it. Not for Wessa, not for Soren, but for Dara. He spoke in a low, even voice the way people speak in dark rooms when they want something to feel safe. He found the first fused root plate by careful pressure, following the anatomy Wessa had drawn for him, and when he reached the calcification, it was exactly where he had predicted it would be. Dara made a sharp sound. Rill did not stop. He said, "Found it. I know that hurts. I am going to hold right there for a few seconds. You are doing very well." He kept one hand steady at the fused plate and held out his other hand to Wessa without looking up. "Compound." Wessa placed the applicator in his hand. He applied the compound in small, precise amounts directly to the fusion point, pressing gently to ensure absorption. Dara made another sound, softer this time. The cloth crinkled in her claw but did not move. Rail found 3 fused plates on the left wing and 1 beginning to fuse on the right. He worked for 57 minutes. He counted the time in the back of his mind without thinking about it, the way people count when they are keeping themselves steady. He talked Dara through every moment of it. At one point she pressed her snout down against the padded surface and he paused and said, "Still here. Not going anywhere. You are the bravest creature on this station." He believed it completely. When the last application was done, he capped the compound, set it on the tray Wessa held out, and sat back on the stool. "Done," he said. "All done. You can close if you want." Dara lay still for a moment. Then she lifted her head. Then she spread both wings. Not the careful, guarded inch-wide spread of a creature managing pain. Both wings, wide, full, slow. The left one extending past 40 degrees, past 60, past the angle that had been locked inside pain for 3 years. She spread them fully and held them there, and the bioluminescent strips along her wing membranes, something Rail had not known Varith Young had, because he had never seen them lit, began to glow. Teal and gold, the same colors as her scales, pulsing softly in the medical bay light. Wessa made a sound. Even Bram, who had positioned himself near the observation window because he refused to be inside the room with the human during the procedure, put his hand flat against the glass. Dara turned her head and looked at Rail. She stepped forward. She lifted her left wing, the one that had hurt the longest, the one that had held 3 years of silent pain in its fused and calcified roots, and she pressed the soft underside of it against his shoulder. Gently, deliberately. Rill did not move. Wessa, very quietly, said, "That is the highest gesture of trust in Varith culture. She is telling you, you are known to her." Rail kept his hand still in his lap. He kept his face steady. He sat with the warm weight of a small dragon's wing against his shoulder and breathed slowly and looked at nothing in particular. When Dara finally lifted the wing and stepped back, she looked at him with those enormous amber eyes and made a sound, low and warm, and nothing like a laugh. Something older than that. Something that did not need a translation. In his jacket pocket, the white pebble she had given him weeks ago was still there. He had never taken it out. It took Soren, Wessa, 2 station staff members, and eventually Rael, who sat down at the entrance to the corridor and read aloud from his field journal until she came out on her own to listen, to resolve the situation. She emerged dusty, cheerful, and carrying a length of cable she had clearly decided belonged to her now. Station Commander Yu, who had reviewed the incident report herself, noted in the margins in her neat 4-handed script, hatchling mobile, energetic, and apparently immune to authority. Recovery confirmed. Rael was informed of this through an official memo. He folded it and put it in his jacket pocket with the white pebble. Dara was everywhere now. The commons, the observation deck, the corridor outside the Threnali food stalls where the smells were interesting. She had decided that Rael's presence was not a thing that required permission anymore. It was simply a fact of her day, the way the fountain was a fact and the light motes were a fact. She appeared at his bench. She appeared outside his quarters. She appeared, once, in the middle of a formal meeting between the human delegation and 2 Dalhuri trade negotiators, having apparently followed Rael through a door she was definitely not supposed to be able to open. The Dalhuri trade negotiators found this delightful. One of them gave her a piece of honeyed grain. Rael was fairly sure this had improved the trade deal, though he had no way to prove it. Counselor Bram came to him on a quiet afternoon when the commons was mostly empty, and the light through the observation panels was long and gold, and Rael was at his bench doing nothing more urgent than watching the gas giant turn below the station. Bram sat. This was notable. In 8 months of coexisting on the same station, Bram had never sat near Rael voluntarily. He did not say thank you. Rael had been told enough about Varith culture by now to understand that formal gratitude from a counselor to a non-Varith was a specific ritual with specific language, and Bram would do that when he was ready to do it, not before. What he said instead was, "Other Varith on the station have been asking me about you." "I know," Rael said. "They want to know what kind of species a human is." Bram's voice was careful, not unfriendly. Careful, the way a person is careful when they are revising an opinion they have held for a long time. Rael thought about it. He looked at the gas giant. "We are the kind of species," he said, "that will sit quietly next to a baby dragon for 3 weeks and eat lunch and take notes, because we cannot do anything useful yet." Bram said nothing. "And we are the kind," Rael continued, "that never stops thinking about how to be useful, even when we are not asked, even when we are told to stay away. We just think about it, from a distance, and write it in a journal." Bram was quiet for a long moment. "That is either a very good quality," he said slowly, "or a very dangerous one." "Probably both," Rael said, "depending on the day." Station Commander Yu's official report to the Galactic Council took 11 days to reach its destination. It was 3 pages long, which was brief by her standards. The relevant section read, "Recommend upgrading the human delegation status from observer to consulting partner, based on demonstrated capacity for patient, culturally informed problem solving under significant social and diplomatic pressure. See attached case file." See also attached incident report regarding maintenance corridor, sublevel 4, which the human also resolved, for supplementary context. The case file was 40 pages, including Rael's complete observational notes, Wes's anatomy records, and the treatment protocol. The Galactic Council read it and argued about it for 6 days and then voted 12-3 in favor. Rael learned about this from the official communication that arrived on a morning when he was at his bench, eating lunch, watching Dara chase a light mote around the fountain in wide, joyful arcs with both wings spread. He read the communication once. He folded it. He watched Dara for a while. She caught the light mote. She held it balanced on her claw with enormous concentration, her wings half spread for balance, her bioluminescent strips pulsing softly in pleasure. Then she looked over at him, saw him watching, and promptly dropped the light mote because she was too pleased that he had seen it to maintain focus. She came padding over and dropped something in his lap. He looked down. A small teal scale, still warm. Varith scales shed slowly and occasionally during growth, and the young sometimes gave them. But this one had been carefully chosen. It was the largest she had shed, edged in gold, the colors of both her parents. He looked at Soren, who was watching from the usual distance. Soren placed one hand briefly flat against her own wing. A formal acknowledgement. Rail looked at the scale in his hands for a long time. Later, he asked Wessa what the gesture meant. It is very old, Wessa said. It means, I will know you in the next life too. He went back to his quarters. He sat at his desk. He opened his field journal to a fresh page. He wrote, she gave me a scale. Wessa says it means she will know me in the next life too. I have no idea what to do with that. He thought for a moment. Then he wrote, I think I will keep it. He closed the journal. Outside the porthole, the gas giant turned below in the dark, vast and slow, and around it the station held its quiet orbit, and inside it a small teal gold dragon was, right now, almost certainly in a corridor she was not supposed to be in. He was not worried. She had good wings for it now.